It's been too long. Welcome back. Come, come watch me work on this guy a little more. I started by covering his shoulders up with some peach-colored plastic. It's just a better base color than red. See how his arm moves back too much, unnaturally at the elbow? I have to restrict that movement by adding a little band of plastic up here. I started by digging a hole in his arm to anchor the plastic, and I'm just going on around it to make a little band. Whoop! So you really need to give it something to hold on to. Smash it down while it's still hot. Okay, so we got that built up. A little bit of a mess. Looks a little bit like Jeff Goldblum in The Fly. Important part though is it successfully restricted the movement of his arm. No more strange posing. Alright, let's get that smoothed out with the soldering iron. And now a little bit of dremel. A little off center. Whoops. Another thing I did was attach his hands a little better with that plastic. They were popping out because of the softness of the plastic on the base figure. When I dremeled it down really thin to do like naked arms, it just wouldn't hold the hands anymore. So I had to reinforce that with some hard plastic. I think I want to make his neck longer, so I'm going to have to cut this head off. Now we're getting to the reason I stopped making these. Just can't stop fixing things that aren't broken. Don't get me wrong, it's gonna look good in the end, but for now I've just got a lot of terrible video to process. So while I was poking around in there, I thought, well, his shoulders aren't really wide enough compared to the guy in the video game, so let me widen those. And while I'm doing that, why don't I add some articulation? So I messed with that. Didn't work out, I'm gonna tell you right now. But here it is anyway. Ah, looks terrible. Alright, I'm gonna fill that in. A little better. A little bit of a better width for the shoulders, I believe. A little bit of smoothing. Of course, now his tattoos are getting all muddy. I warned you. I told you it would get worse, but you chose to keep watching. Gonna need to remove the head again, obviously, because why not? Okay, just put his head aside for a minute and start fixing that neck. If you see his torso in the game, it's got this kind of stylized look of being like elongated and like thin at the waist with the broad shoulders. And I just don't think that the figure's capturing that yet. So I'm trying to fix that here. Just gonna widen the armholes a little bit. I'm sort of shaving down his rib cage so I can move it up a little. You know what? I was trying to avoid doing this, but I'm gonna have to take the whole thing apart. Like I said, it's gonna get messy. Alright, now we've got it all open. I'm going to be shaving down every part that makes contact with another part of the figure so that I can build the area up again with plastic so that eventually when the paint gets scraped off, because you know it always does, there's no way to avoid that. When it does, the color underneath will at least somewhat match. Another thing that was annoying me, the torso was not tightly attached enough at the waist. So here I'm just going to build that up from nothing, make it kind of tight, and also that's going to give me a chance to lengthen it just a little bit. First, what I'm doing is building a little ring around where it's going to rotate, and then I'll make sure it can rotate and doesn't get stuck. Then I'll be able to just build on top of that without worrying. Alright, that little post is completely covered. the plastic can rotate. Now I can just feel free to cover it. Actually, what I need to do is cover the whole part that makes contact with the legs area here, and then rotate it again. Okay, that works. Now I'll be able to attach the rest. But first, take a little break and work on the neck. Start building the collarbone back up. Now we're going to get this abdomen section attached to the legs, holding it slightly in the air so that I can give it a little length. And now melt it smooth with the soldering iron. More plastic. More soldering. This stuff really makes terrible fumes when you melt it. Build his chest up a little bit. Just gonna grind down the rough edges. A little bit more plastic. So I'm using this ABS plastic. Pretty awful fumes when it's hot, so I'm doing it outside. And then I can sculpt into it with the Dremel pretty much immediately because it cools very quickly, which in a lot of ways makes it more convenient than the epoxy putty. Of course, with that putty, you gotta wait a half hour for it to cure. And then if you need to take any off, once it does cure, it makes some awful toxic powder. And of course, dremeling this stuff, it just, it flakes off pretty cleanly. Just roughly building up the areas for the various muscle groups. Little V-shaped thing that a lot of people seem to like. Lower abs. Belly button. Back to smoothing with the Dremel. You see how the plastic is just kind of shredding and clumping, and I just wipe it away, which is the way a regular action figure acts when you do that. It's nice, you can just keep going back and forth like that. Rough in the shape by piling up a bunch of plastic, and then grind it down to refine the shape, and just keep going back and forth as you need to. So I'm just thinking about how the arm's gonna fit in there. I keep going between just attaching it as it was before, more or less, and adding that extra piece. Because it always bothered me that he wasn't able to move his arms all the way up like a person would. I'm doing the same thing I did for his waist, which is to cover the little peg that's gonna go into the torso for the rotation, and just making sure that it can move and it doesn't get stuck in place. I'm gonna cut this off here. Thanks for watching, and I'll have another one soon. For real this time.